Hi everybody, welcome to Out of the Gate, Daily Racing Form's weekend handicapping preview program. I'm Dan Illman. Thanks so much for watching. Here's what's coming up in a special 2017 Year in Review edition of Out of the Gate. Daily Racing Form handicapper Matt Bernier and I will give the Out of the Gate top 4 performances of 2017. We'll go back and look at some of the best efforts from some of the top racehorses of the year. Nicole Russo's pedigree pick, she's going to take a look back at some of the top sires in 2017 and some names you're going to need to know for the upcoming racing season. Peter Thomas Fornatel's Tournament Talk will recap 2017, preview to some exciting tournaments in 2018. JK, his play of the day, he's going to go through some of the highs and lows of his 2017 betting. And Craig Milkowski's Time Form US Spotlight takes a look at the top performers from a time form perspective. Lots to cover in this special edition of Out of the Gate, so let's break Out of the Gate. We begin Out of the Gate this week with a different wrinkle from our usual horse swatch segment. This week, Matt and I are going to take a look at 2 horses that we feel have the ability to be big names and do some great things in 2018. I'm going to go first. Admittedly, it's not a really creative pick. West Coast got good last summer for Bob Baffert. He first won the Los Alamitos Derby, then he shipped to Saratoga for the Midsummer Derby, the prestigious Grade 1 Travers. And as they swing into the stretch, West Coast, who in the Los Alamitos Derby actually came widest and fastest from off the pace, here was prominent throughout, turned into the stretch, and at the 3/16 pole, he has this field over a barrel. He goes on to win, and what I like about West Coast is his tactical speed, his ability to run fast Beyer speed figures against good company, and his professionalism. Just look at him, straight and strong at the end of this 1.25 miles winning the Travers. After the Travers, Bob Baffert decided, well, we got a big pot in the Pennsylvania Derby, so West Coast ran in the Pennsylvania Derby, and this time he came from slightly off of the pace, and as they swing into the stretch, he has already broken this thing wide open. He was on his right lead a little bit early on the turn, something I didn't love, but once he got clear, again, West Coast just really was superior to these horses, and because of this effort, he went off as kind of an interesting wise guy horse against older runners in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And while no match for 2 salty older performers in Gun Runner and Collected, he ran a just fine third. We are expecting Matt to see this horse probably in the Pegasus World Cup, where he's going to have to deal with Gun Runner again. Maybe he's not ready for Gun Runner just yet, but I think he's got a big 2018, hopefully culminating in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
I mean, isn't he right now the favorite for Horse of the Year in 2018?
Favorite in the Breeders' Cup Classic? Maybe.
And for a number of reasons. I mean, Gun Runner, it sounds like he's done after the Pegasus, so that leaves the door wide open for someone to take the initiative, whether it's a horse like Collected or it's a horse like West Coast. I think the good thing about West Coast is it felt like all year with these 3-year-olds in 2017, we're waiting for one to step up and say, this is my division. Always Dreaming couldn't do it. Cloud Computing couldn't do it. Taproot couldn't do it. Finally, West Coast showed up and he said, you know what, this is mine now. And I wonder if it's going to continue on. He's already run fast races and he's run well against older horses. I think he's in line for a big year.
You mentioned Collected, who's a real hard hitter, and we'll see him on opening day Tuesday at Santa Anita, where he will be a big favorite. I think West Coast has got more upward mobility, more scope for improvement than Collected. He is just turning 4, and I think he's going to hit that physical and emotional maturity. West Coast is really a horse that you've got to be mindful of. Maybe not in the Pegasus World Cup if Gun Runner shows up, but once Gun Runner goes off to the farm to be a daddy, this thing's wide open perhaps for West Coast to take over and dominate. I like your horse to watch in 2018 because it's kind of an under-the-radar selection for a great trainer.
Yeah, kind of an oddball pick here. Chad Brown, we all know Chad has the best horses, the best stock. You would expect maybe this is going to be one of the 2-year-olds, soon to be 3-year-olds, Rushing Fall, Analyze It, any of those kinds. What about Twisted Tom? No one has talked about Twisted Tom because he hasn't run since the Empire Classic, but we're going to take a look at the Empire Classic now. This was an impressive effort, in my opinion. This was the most professional he's been throughout his career. He was much more forwardly placed this day, and you see the horse that he's corralling right now. That's Control Group. All Control Group did was come back to win the Discovery at Aqueduct by 3-4 lengths. Got a big, gaudy Beyer speed figure up near 100 anyway. Might have been over it, actually. This horse, Twisted Tom, I think distance is his friend. I think this is an instance where he's the kind of horse that no one is going to think of off the top of their head, but maybe next year, East Coast, you're going to lose Gun Runner. The other boys are really going to take advantage of the West Coast, whether it is a West Coast horse, or it's Collected, or it's somebody else like that. The East Coast, there's a lot of big prizes, a lot of big pots out there. Why can't this horse, again, distance is his friend, he's got Chad Brown in his corner, he continues to take steps forward. I don't know. I kind of feel like Twisted Tom might be a horse. Just maybe keep an eye on, throw him in your DRF horse watch.
Like West Coast, a 3-year-old that's going to turn 4 in 2018, and I kind of agree with you. I think that he is just starting to fill out and figure himself out. As you said, the Empire Classic, wow, that was a really impressive race because he got into the race early. This is a horse that's a grinder. He ran in the Belmont Stakes. You get the feeling that he wants to run all day long. You said distance is going to be his friend. I agree wholeheartedly. The fact that now he's got a new dimension, that he could stay close to a sharp, fast horse like Control Group and still maintain that finish. That bodes well for Twisted Tom against open foes in 2018.
And the other thing I love about this horse, he's won at Laurel, Saratoga, Belmont, Finger Lakes, you name it. He shows up, he runs his race. He's not one of those kind of horse for course kind of tracks, or horses rather. He shows up, he runs wherever it is, he runs whatever distance it is, but I think that's the beautiful thing. 1.125 miles, those are going to be right in his wheelhouse. I would imagine races like the Suburban, you know, up at Saratoga,
Brooklyn.
Woodward, Whitney, Brooklyn, any of those. I think he's possibly in line for a big year.
So we're looking ahead to 2018 with West Coast and Twisted Tom, but in this week's Out of the Gate, it's all about the year in review. We're going to review our top 4 performances from 2017, beginning with performance number 4. We're going to take a look now at who we consider to be, and we're going to have different opinions on this, the top 4 performances of 2017. We'll begin with performance number 4. Let's put up my top 4 list of the best performances of 2017. Collected, number 4. We're going to take a look at him in a minute, winning the Pacific Classic. Arrogate, the Dubai World Cup. That was a brilliant performance from start to finish after missing the break and overcoming everything thrown at him. More Spirit. Forget what happened to More Spirit after the Metropolitan Handicap. There's nothing went right. That was a brilliant performance. And my number 1, Gun Runner, soon to be named Horse of the Year, his tour de force and very game performance in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Now let's throw up Matt's top 4. Slightly different. He does have More Spirit at number 4. He's got Gun Runner's Woodward at number 3, Gun Runner's Breeders' Cup Classic at number 2, and Arrogate's Dubai World Cup at number 1. So for out of the gate purposes, it's going to be sort of an aggregate number 4, and we can argue left and right. Matt, of course, is going to have his top 10 performances on the Matt Bernier Show, which will air next Friday at noon Eastern, live.drf.com, and of course it'll be on demand, video.drf.com, and the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Let's watch Collected, the Pacific Classic. This horse has always been consistent, but this was his coming out party. He was catching Arrogate off that dull performance in the San Diego Handicap, but he still had to prove he could go 1.25 miles, and he could beat the horse the level of Arrogate. He went right to the front. Arrogate found his best footing late. Matt, I thought he beat Arrogate on the square, and he made himself into a big name with this effort.
Yeah, this was really, like you said, the coming out party. This proved that he belonged in this entire kind of conversation for possible Breeders' Cup Classic time. I thought it was a perfect effort. He went out there, he set the fractions, drew off. Arrogate, say what you will about the San Diego leading into the Pacific Classic. He ran at the end of that race, and you look at the figure, it came back fast. I believe he earned a 114 Beyer speed figure in that race to Pacific Classic. So I thought Collected did everything fine. The interesting thing is, keep in mind, we've talked about it a little bit off air. I mean, this was a horse that Bob Baffert thought was going to be a top-notch turf horse, and all of a sudden he's just been a monster on the dirt. It's nice to see when you get these sort of pleasant surprises and they continue to improve and continue to run well.
I believe he's number 10 on your top 10 list again, which will be on the Matt Bernier Show next Friday. We know not a lot of traffic that we're going to see from Arrogate in the Dubai World Cup, but just he ran hard from start to finish. He did it at 1.25 miles. He beat a top horse, and he did it in fast time. That was Collected. After that performance, he ran his heart out against Gun Runner in the Breeders' Cup Classic, was second best. We'll see him Tuesday at Santa Anita on opening day, and if all goes well, we'll assume we'll see him face Gun Runner once again in the Pegasus World Cup. Tell us about your number 4.
Well, you know, it's a situation where Gun Runner did so many good things, where he would just show up and run races, and I think we kind of just, I don't want to say got complacent, but we expected to see giant efforts. There is something to be said about going up to Saratoga and winning both of their giant races in the fashion that they did. This is the Woodward, and this is him going out there and just bearing, I understand, not a great field, You got decent enough horses in there, though. Neolithic was third in the Dubai World Cup. I understand maybe Rally Cry doesn't want to run against this kind of competition, but they are left in his wake, and Gunrunner never gets out of first gear. This was really when I kind of started to look at it. You look at the fractions, you look at the way that he ran. I don't care about the lead change thing anymore. That's just him. He does it all the time. This was when you had to start looking at it. If you weren't buying into him at this point, you had to start buying him as a legitimate threat to Arrogate and anybody else that came along for the Breeders' Cup Classic.
This horse was unfazed by his trip to Dubai. He ran really well in Dubai. Arrogate ran a super race that day. We'll take a look at that race a little bit later. But Arrogate, you can argue, even though he ran well in the Pacific Classic, his form kind of just went right off the cliff after coming back from Dubai. Not so with Gunrunner. Big race at Churchill Downs, 2 big races at Saratoga, giant performance in the Breeders' Cup Classic. That is a remarkable string of consistency and top performances.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, too. I don't know if enough people really think about it like this. The fact that he lost to Arrogate in Dubai, okay, it is what it is, but he ran second, and you look at how far ahead he was of third. I mean, this horse very easily could have had an unbeaten 2017 campaign. To me, I think he's the unanimous horse of the year. I'll be stunned if somebody else goes against him, but it's just a scenario where really appreciate these unbelievable campaigns when we see them, and this is one of the best that we've seen in the past handful of years. We've
been spoiled the last handful of years with some top horses. This ranks among those big campaigns, and of course one more start for Gunrunner where he will go favorite at Gulfstream Park in the Pegasus World Cup. We want to hear your top 5. Please tweet at us at DRF Video, at DRF Inside Post. We'd like to hear your 5 and tell us why we're way off base or why you completely agree. That would be rare if you completely agree with us. Now let's go to Nicole Russo's pedigree pick segment. She's going to recap the top stallions of 2017 and some names that you should follow as we head into the 2018 racing season. And Peter Thomas Fornatel will recap all the major tournament happenings of 2017 while looking ahead to some very exciting tournament action. Let's hit those segments right now.
Hi guys, Nicole Russo here to talk bloodstock for our year in review edition of Out of the Gate. There are plenty of ways to evaluate stallions, and we're going to look at a few of them here because depending on how you analyze the statistics, a couple of different stallions with a really great year, and some we're going to want to look at as we move ahead into 2018, especially the spring 3-year-old prep season. Now, the traditional way to compare stallions is by progeny earnings, and on those merits, there were 2 horses who dominated in 2017. The late Unbridled Song, who of course was led by Arrogate, winner of the world's 2 richest races this year, and Candy Ride, who is powered by Gunrunner. The latter is a virtual lock to be voted Horse of the Year on the strength of his 4 Grade 1 victories, capped by this win in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Now, neither of these stallions a one-hit wonder. Unbridled Song, also the sire of Breeders' Cup Distaff winner and likely champion Forever Unbridled, another feather in his cap posthumously. And Candy Ride, the sire of Grade 1 winners Ascend and Separation of Powers. The latter, I think, going to be a very good 3-year-old filly as we move into 2018. Really going to want to keep an eye out for her in some of these one-turn events in New York for 3-year-old fillies, like the Acorn, the Test, the Prioress. She's got the breeding to go a little bit longer, but I think those are going to be her wheelhouse, really. She's an exciting horse. But now, of course, with those massive purses out there, the $12 million this year for the Pegasus World Cup, $10 million for the Dubai World Cup, and $6 million for the Breeders' Cup Classic out there, that could obviously skew those earnings lists a little. And that's why another method to evaluate stallions is our exclusive buyer-sire performance standings, now available as a sortable online tool for the first time. Just another way to give you a little bit more context into a stallion's year based on performances and percentages. It's always been quality over quantity for Warfront, as Claiborne really controls its stallions' books. And Warfront was one of the leaders on the buyer-sire standings. He has the most buyers to meet or surpass the benchmark figure of 90 this year. A total of 26% of his runners hit that figure this season, giving him the lead among all stallions with 50 or more starters. Now, Warfront's top figure actually came from Designed for War. He posted a 104 when second in the Pan American. That just shows you how, because buyers are assigned to all runners in a race, those figures can provide a little bit of a broader picture of a stallion season. Case further in point, Warfront's other top figures came from Lancaster Bomber, who was multiple Grade 1 placed here. Now, meanwhile, Tappet was dethroned in 2017 from his record-setting 3-year run atop the Progeny earnings list, but he did have another outstanding year. Runners like Belmont winner Tappet out there, his third winner of the oldest and longest American Classic, and he did figure prominently on the Beyer Sire Performance Standings General Sires list. He's represented by 34 individual starters who have earned Beyers of 90 or higher this season, giving him the most individuals to hit that figure on the year. I also love that he's finishing the year strong with his 2-year-olds. Here's Marconi, who is a $2 million yearling purchase, breaking his maiden at Aqueduct recently. Marconi is one of 17 individual 2-year-old winners for Tappet from October to December. That group led by unbeaten Principe Gilerme, who earned a 92 Beyer romping in his 2-turn debut, headed for the Fairgrounds Series of Kentucky Derby Preps. Have to like the way these horses have come on at the end of the season as the distances have gotten longer. Classic sire Tappet perhaps looks poised for a good spring. And finally, we'd really be remiss if we didn't mention the career season turned in by Medaglia d'Oro. You'll see here that he sired an incredible 7 individual Grade 1 winners on the season, leading all stallions in that top-level category. 3 of those were multiple Grade 1 winners, and he closed out the year with a pair of Breeders' Cup winners. His multiple Grade 1 winner, Bolt d'Oro, was third with a troubled trip in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, also has to be considered a top contender for next spring's classics. Thanks for being with us this year on Out of the Gate. Now let's get you over to Peter Thomas Fornatale for some tournament talk.
Hi, everybody. Peter Thomas Fornatale back here on Out of the Gate with this week's Tournament Talk segment. In keeping with the theme of the program, I thought I would underline some of the most impressive tournament performances of 2017 and talk a little generally about what we have going on at the DRF Tournament's website right now. I think back to the biggest performances of the year, and I want to start with the Horse Player World Series and a tournament player named Pete Puich finishing 1-2, hitting his own exacta in the tournament. Had a lot of fun talking with him back then. You can find that article in the DRF archives. Maybe I'll send it around for a little end of the year treat on Twitter. Later in the year, perhaps equaling, maybe even surpassing that accomplishment, Terry Cook at the Saratoga tournament, winning both days, both the Wednesday and Thursday Saratoga contest, finishes on top both times. Amazing. Then he comes back in November at the Aqueduct contest and finishes best a third time, 3 for 3 in NYRA events. Just an amazing performance. Had a chance to talk to him about that back in November. That's an article I'll send around as well. Other huge tournament news this year on the positive side, the announcement by Daily Racing Forum of the debut of the World Championship of Handicapping, our new $1 million no takeout online championship tournament. We've been running qualifiers for this since the Keeneland meet in April. Qualifying's really picked up. We have Grade 1 qualifiers every Saturday. You put up $580 and 1 in 10 players wins his or her $5,000 seat to the 1 million no takeout finals. You don't have to get involved for $580 though. You can also feed in round 1 events for $95 or even cheaper, get into the round 1 events every operating day. We've got free contests every week. I love this idea. It's the story I really want to write. Somebody starts their journey for free, ends up winning their share of $1 million at the World Championship of Handicapping. Other big news in tournaments this year, dovetailing with some news from this week, the Pegasus World Cup Betting Challenge. That is going to be happening in conjunction with the Pegasus in January at Gulfstream. This is a $12,000 tournament. I have to put up $12K to play, but there is no entry fee. And of course, instead of putting that up, you can play in qualifiers on DRF tournaments every operating day. You can start feeding in This weekend, there is a qualifier to win that full $12,000. You can do it on DRF tournaments. And then we've also got another tournament to highlight on DRFT. If you don't want to play in a Mythical Online for some reason, if you don't want to play in a big live bank, we've also got a big Vegas tournament in the form of the Horse Player World Series. $94, 1 in 19 players punch their tickets, and you can feed into those $11 every operating day on DRFT. Go to tournaments.drf.com. Check out all the options on there. Other games as well. Lots of exciting stuff happening as we close out 2018, and can't wait for even more exciting stories as we get to the new year and beyond. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. Stay tuned on Out of the Gate. We'll be back right after this.
You asked, we listened. DRF Plus has more flexible subscription options. Use DRF Plus Basic for exclusive news and analysis, including our DRF Live real-time news feed. Or go deeper with DRF Pro and unlock buyers, closer looks, picks, and reports, including the DRF Daily Game Plan. DRF TV viewers get 50% off the plan of your choice. Use code DRFTV50 at checkout. Learn more about the DRF Plus subscription plans at drf.com/plus.
Welcome back to a special edition of Out of the Gate. It's our 2017 year in review, and we are up to performance number 3 as we count down from 4 to 1 of the top performances of 2017 on our individual lists. My number 4 was Collected, who we just saw. Matt's number 4 is the horse that is the aggregate selection from Out of the Gate as number 3, and I agree. Let's take a look at the Metropolitan Handicap and More Spirit. And Matt, More Spirit was always a rock-solid 2-year-old. He ran some good races at 3. We noticed some babyish tendencies. He was lazy in many of those races. He came back in 4, and Baffert put him on a little bit of a confidence-building tour, sending him around to smaller spots. He got some big wins. He manned up in this race. This is a giant performance in fast time against a really good horse.
Yeah, I guess that's the biggest thing. You see who he defeated and the way that he defeated a horse like Sharp Azteca, who ultimately turned into a Grade 1 winner. It took a little bit longer for Sharp Azteca, but More Spirit, I think the fascinating thing was this was a horse who was a little bit lazy as a 3-year-old. We talked about that, well documented. All of a sudden, he had some speed. He had some speed thrown into him. He was always one that was going to come from a little bit farther out of it. Boy, you added that to the mix. He turned into a different animal. I believe he earned a 117 buyer in that race there, the Met Mile. I suppose, for me, his year, though, as a whole, is kind of an incomplete, because after that, we saw him one more time, and it was off of a long layoff from the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and there were kind of iffy vibes going into that spot. It's, to me, ultimately going to be a what could have been instead of a what was.
That was his year.
Yeah.
The Metropolitan Handicap, a minute 32 or whatever it was, that was his year. He did some nice things at Oaklawn. He did some nice things at Lone Star Park. He's supposed to beat those horses, considering his reputation and Baffert's reputation, of course, nationwide. That was really his year, and it shows that these racehorses, it's not a video game and they're not machines. Maybe this performance just took all of the starch out of More Spirit, because after this race, Baffert was thinking, maybe we'll run this horse in the Whitney. Well, then it was maybe we'll run this horse in the Awesome again, and then he disappears. He's working. Yeah. He's working sluggishly. He's always a bad workhorse. He didn't work at all. He didn't show any sort of vigor in his workouts. And then in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, he was awful. You know what? I'm going to make an analogy or a comparison here, and for people that aren't baseball fans, you're going to have to just bear with me here. Johan Santana was a really, really good pitcher throughout his entire career. Probably borderline Hall of Fame. Not going to get there, though. He threw a no-hitter for the Mets a number of years ago now, and everybody had always said a lot of pitches,
needs 95, maybe 100. Anything north of that, you're going to start to get a little bit into that red area. And guess what? They continued on. I believe he ended up throwing something like 140 pitches. He got the no-hitter. The problem was, after that, the lemon was squeezed dry. There was nothing else left. And I wonder, boy, sometimes if the effort is so unbelievable, so over the top, maybe it squeezes the lemon too dry, and maybe that's what you're going to get. That's the last shot that he had.
Thanks for bringing up a really painful fantasy experience. I had Yoan Santana that year. I also had him when he pitched in Yankee Stadium in his next start, and he was shellacked. Getting back to more spirit, I don't believe he's been retired.
No.
I think Baffer's just going to give him a long time off and hope to get this horse feeling good again, because if there's one word to describe more spirit right now, it is sour. Nonetheless, his Metropolitan Handicap ranks as one of the top 4 performances of 2017, at least from the crew here at Out of the Gate. Quick break. We come back. Performance number 3. Time for performance number 3 of 2017. You're probably asking yourselves, why don't these match up to our lists? Well, we have a lot of duplicates on our list, and we don't want to go back and repeat ourselves, so we do have our separate list. Again, Matt's top 4 for the year from 4 down: More Spirit, Gunrunners Woodward, Gunrunners BCC, Arrogates Dubai World Cup. My top 4: Collected Pacific Classic, Arrogates Dubai World Cup, More Spirits Met Mile, Gunrunners Breeders' Cup Classic. We'll get to those in a little bit. As for Out of the Gate purposes, and trying to not have a redundant program, our number 3 is Matt's number 1. It was Arrogates Dubai World Cup, and I can understand if this is number 1 on a lot of your lists. Let's revisit the Dubai World Cup. The start was an unmitigated disaster.
Well, that's part of what makes this effort as unbelievable, in my opinion, as it was. You see, he got pinched out of there really, really badly, taken all the way back to last, and at this point, I don't know how many people were betting this horse at the odds that he was over here in the States, but you had to be looking at it saying he can't win, especially with a horse like Gunrunner on the front. And now you see him, and not only is he going to go and win, he wins and he's geared down. To me, and maybe I'm a bit overboard here, it's not just the best race, in my opinion, in 2017. It's the best race I've ever seen.
And that's not some bum he's steamrolling in mid-stretch. That's Gunrunner, who's going to be the horse of the year, and Arrogate ran right by him, and Mike Smith is really not asking Arrogate for his best. Just consider everything that was thrown at Arrogate. He had to ship halfway across the world. He was competing without Lasix. He basically gave this field a head start. He went and passed everybody, including a horse that's going to be Horse of the Year in North America in 2017. It's truly a special performance. And it's a shame that his performance here, and maybe his overall career, will be tarnished somewhat because he didn't come back the same way after the Dubai World Cup. And after that gut-busting performance, you can understand if a little of the starch got taken out of him.
You know, it almost feels like instead of being the superstar, whatever else you want to call it, that he's more going to end up being a comet, where it was really hot when it was there, but it was just a flash and it was gone, because he went off form in a bad way after that. I mean, his Breeders' Cup Classic was a disaster. The San Diego clearly was a disaster, and he ran fine in the Pacific Classic, but that was not the same Arrogate that we had seen in Dubai and even in those races prior, including the Pegasus World Cup. He, to me anyway, feels like the ultimate. When he was on his game, I don't think anybody could beat him. But we saw that, unfortunately, that was just for a very, very short amount of time.
That's performance number 2 on our list. And really the question that's going to be barroom discussion from now until the end of racing time is what happened to Arrogate. Did he just get sour after that big performance? Did he not like Del Mar? Was he not that good to begin with and perhaps was overrated? People were comparing him to Secretariat, to Man o' War, to Seattle Slew, all of the greats of all time, and then the wheels fell off. What's your opinion?
I think it's just a matter of what we talked about with More Spirit. If you hit 10,000 RPMs on the rev limiter, it's going to take something out of the engine. The engine can't always run at that level. I feel like he was there for 3 or 4 races. Might be the best 3 or 4 race stretch I've ever seen. Probably will ever see. I can't imagine anyone doing anything better than that. The problem is it was that good for that long, and I wonder if that's ultimately, like you say, maybe that takes him out of the conversation of one of the all-time greats. His best, I still think, is better than anything I've ever seen. But I don't know that that can immediately make him one of the top 10 or 15 of all time.
Arrogate, our performance number 2 here on Out of the Gate. JK is going to relive some of his highs and lows from a betting perspective in 2017. Craig Milkowski is going to take a look at Timeform's best horses on the racetrack in 2017 as well. Let's go to those segments.
Hey everybody, welcome to JK's Play of the Day. If you're a handicapper, if you're a bettor, you know your year is defined by the big scores and the tough beats. We're going to focus a little bit on some of my tough beats and some of the scores that I was very happy to have had and the opinions that I was happy to have been right. And we'll talk about the ones, of course, that weren't so well. And I think a lot of us will remember those more than the ones that were good. My first, and chronologically, my first disappointing outcome of the year was the 2017 Preakness, where I had was totally against Classic Empire in the Derby. However, his performance in that race, kind of showing that he was still a horse after some of his obstacles, he came back and performed at a very high level in the Preakness. And you'll see here, a lot of people talked about whether or not Julien Leparoux got to this position a little bit earlier than we would have liked. I think he did what he had to do. He put away the Derby winner, and Cloud Computing just happened to take advantage of a little bit of a pace meltdown, and Classic Empire was nailed at the wire. This is a significant play for me in the Santa Anita Preakness contest, which a lot of people qualified in through DRF tournaments. I had bet my entire bankroll on either Always Dreaming or Classic Empire to win, with it weighted a little bit more on Classic Empire. Would have put my bankroll around $15,000 going into the last few races, but instead I ended up at zero. So that was my first tough beat of the year. My second tough beat is going to also lead in well to one of my best scores of the year, and that's in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile Sharp Azteca. I was bullish on Sharp Azteca going into this race. I was alive in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge for about $30,000 with a double with Rushing Fall into Sharp Azteca. I made a huge play there, and at this point, I thought I had a real chance to win the thing. And then it got away from me. Battle of Midway, who was on the outside of the track, which I think most people know was the good part of the track, began to head at us. But Sharp Azteca showed the grit, the gut, and the class that he has, and fought back for a narrow defeat, but definitely a heartbreaker for me in the Breeders' Cup tournament, the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. Also, I was fortunate enough to be on air that day to give out a pick six, and that was a single. It was the only loss I had in a pick six, so I would have loved to help the people out a little bit more as well. And I also think I gave the horse out on Out of the Gate also. So tough beat for everyone. Now going on to some of my favorite moments in 2017 and some of the good scores that I had, and we'll stick with the big horse, the big Sharp Azteca, and his performance in the Cigar Mile. We talked about it a lot on the podcast. I even made a wager with co-host Pete Fornatel, and you might see his face somewhere in this video with the handlebar mustache, the Fu Manchu bet. I thought Sharp Azteca was going to take advantage of the fact that the pace was going to be fast. That was going to play into his hands, and that's exactly what happened. And this race is another reason why I think Sharp Azteca is extremely live in the Pegasus coming up in a few weeks. I think he's a special horse. Despite what you might think about some of the connections, I think that this horse is talented, and he'll run through any scenario. One of my favorite horses of 2017, and I look forward to seeing him back on the track in 2018. Going on to my final score, allowed me and a group of guys, including Pete Fornatel, at Saratoga to hit the pick six, was a single with Practical Joke, the quote-unquote one-turn horse that has been a theme in our Players podcast for many years now. And he got a beautiful trip, a beautiful ride by Joel Rosario, stayed down on the inside, got paced to run into with Talkaful, and at no point of this race that I think I was losing. It was one of those races where you can turn around and start high-fiving people when they're at the 16th pole. It was extremely gratifying. I was bullish about the horse on Out of the Gate. I was bullish about the horse on the DRF Players podcast. A lot of times I'm going to give you losers, but it does feel good when I can point you in the direction of a winner, and Practical Joke was definitely that. I was lucky enough yesterday to see Practical Joke at Coolmore, who will be beginning his new career for, I believe, $30,000 coming up soon. So if you have a mare, holler at the guys at Coolmore to try to get Practical Joke some blood running through your stable. So I appreciate it. Thanks for the support this year. Thanks for allowing me to chat with Racing about you, and I look forward to seeing you guys next year.
Hi, this is Craig Milkowski of Timeform US for this week's edition of Out of the Gate. Today we're going to look back at some of the best races of 2017, and we're going to do it from a Timeform US speed and pace figure perspective. The first thing we're going to look at is some of the, we're going to stick to grade 1 races today from the year. And the first thing we're going to look at is the 3 slowest pace grade 1 races that we ran this year. The first one we're going to look at is the Santa Anita Sprint Championship, which is a big prep for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. It didn't draw a particularly strong field, but it did draw a standout favorite in Roy H. And you probably know his name, as he did go on to win the Breeders' Cup Sprint this year. The Santa Anita Sprint Championship just was slow from start to finish, and it can be a little deceiving because the raw times look fast. but it was a very fast surface that day. That 22:07 opening quarter that Roy H. sat off of was not all that impressive. And what you can see is he managed to run a 1:23 time form U.S. speed figure. I lined up all the speed figures from the race in the middle column on the right. And that 1:23 is actually well below grade 1 par for grade 1 older horses, which is about 128, 129 range. But what you can take out of this is when you see those blue fractions, know that the pace probably affected the time. And it's really tough to get a good speed figure when you set a slow pace. So in this case, Roy H. was a horse I really liked in the Breeders' Cup Sprint because he sat off that slow pace and was able to finish well and win easy. And it worked out well this time. But so don't be afraid to bet those lower speed figures when a horse overcomes a slow pace in a grade 1 race. The second slowest pace race that we had was the Humana Distaff at Churchill Downs on Derby weekend. It was won by Paula Silver Lining, who's won numerous great grade 1 races, but she's won numerous graded races. I believe this was her first grade 1 win. And she actually went on to win another race with a 1:18. You can see that in her next start. But this was, again, another race with a very slow pace. You can see the leader was in front by 2, Super Humor, but ran only a 1:02 pace figure. Paula's Silver Lining sat right off of that pace, took over after about a quarter mile and was able to win easily. Once again here, what you can see is the pace, even though they all ran 1:08, 1:07, most of the horses came back and ran better speed figures the next time out. So slow pace, again, kind of inhibits speed figures, so don't be afraid to back the slow paces when you have an excuse. By far the slowest race from a pace perspective was the Ballerina at Saratoga. It was won by the Moon in a wire-to-wire fashion. She set a 92 opening quarter mile and even slowed more to 87 after a half mile. We're going to take a look at the stretch run of that race, as you can see, and just nothing really happens. The top 2 just ran 1-2 all the way around the track. Karina Mia did run well to kind of make up some ground late, but the speed figures were just not indicative of these horses. And this was a race that was, in fact, so slow, I would just throw it out next time from a handicapping perspective. Rather than trying to draw any conclusions from a race where there's just not much to go on, the horses only ran really the last quarter of a mile, I think you're better off putting a line through these races and moving on to the next one. From there, we're going to go to the 3 fastest paced grade 1 races we saw this year. And starting out as the 3rd fastest pace was the Preakness Stakes. It was run over a muddy track, so the fractions may not look as fast as you'd think they were if you just went from a raw time perspective. But that 46.81 half and the 1:11 3/4 mile are actually really quick over that surface that was pretty slow from the mud. And you know, we can see what happened here. The closers didn't run particularly well, which isn't uncommon in the mud. They kind of get all the kickback and covered in mud. Derby winner Always Dreaming set that fast pace. You can see him at the bottom. He actually finished 8th. Ran pace figures well into the 140s before dropping out of it. And from there, Classic Empire took over, and he looked like a winner turning for home. He opened up 3 on the field, but the fast pace also caught up to him, did him in, and Cloud Computing came flying late. One thing to be careful in is these races, it kind of fell apart. Nobody really did any running from the back. It was just kind of a stagger fest home. And when you look at the horses in this field, they're just not a lot of nobody went on to much future success in here. So when you get a slow race where nobody's finishing, maybe you want to excuse the track surface in this condition, but otherwise, these are usually not good races to follow the winners. The second fastest pace race we had this year was the Santa Anita Derby, which was won by Gormley. Gormley sat off the fast pace set by Battle of Midway. He was in a little bit of a 2-horse duel with Royal Mo. Of note here is that kind of interesting, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th place finishers all have yet to race. That's why you don't see a figure next to their race, like Royal Mo shows at 1:15 and there's nothing to the left. So 3 of the top 5 haven't run back. Gormley has yet to win. He ran a few more times after he ran in the Derby. He took advantage of the hot pace on Derby day, but didn't run particularly, he won, but he didn't get a very good figure of 113. And you can see Battle of Midway got the 116. Despite losing, he actually got the best figure in the race. And I think he proved throughout the rest of the year that he was definitely the best horse in this race. He went on to finish a good third in the Kentucky Derby at 115, and he eventually won the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile in a big upset. But he was definitely the horse with the most talent. He just got caught up in that fast pace. When you see all those red fractions, it was hot, and he was definitely the best horse in this field. The fastest fast-paced race that we had this year was the Spinaway at Saratoga. It was run by Lady Ivanka, who has yet to come back and race. What's of note of this race, it was 2-year-old, so it's not unusual for horses to kind of fall apart here. But what they did, they really fell apart. This was a slow race by any measure, well below par for grade 1 2-year-old fillies. The third place finisher, Separation of Powers, actually got a much better figure at 97 than the runner-up with an 87, and even the winner with a 93. She did run back. She won her next out. I believe it was the First Ed at Belmont. And then she went on to run well in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly. She ran a good third, I believe it was, but once again was kind of caught up in a fast pace when a long shot closer came on the win. But this is, again, one of those races where it wasn't very fast, so I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in any of the horses coming out of it until they can show something else. Maybe you want to look for the horses that were part of the fast pace, as they're more likely to do better going forward. Finally, we want to wrap this up by just looking at the top 3 Timeform US speed figures of 2017. No surprise here. It's horses everybody knows and got familiar with. Arrogate was the third fastest, and he did that really earlier in the year, winning the inaugural Pegasus World Cup at Gulfstream Park. He did it with a big 139, which matched what he had run prior in the Breeders' Cup Classic the year before when he beat California Chrome. And you can see in his next race, he came back to win his much heralded Dubai World Cup win, where he had a bad start and came from in the back of the pack to win. But unfortunately for Arrogate, that was the beginning of the end. He ran that 139, went to Dubai and won, and then was never able to put it back together in 3 tries, all at Del Mar, where he ran really poorly the first time and then just so-so the next 2, and now he's off to be retired. The second fastest figure was Gunrunner, who's almost a cinch to be the horse of the year this year. He did it in the Breeders' Cup Classic, which I mentioned, where he finished ahead of Arrogate and others. He won pretty easy, taking it to the he just took it to the field right out of the gate with those big 140 pace figures and held it all the way to the wire, 138 final time figure. And because Timeform US, we give extra credit when the pace is hot, that's where you see he got his 140. Now, normally you would assume winning the Breeders' Cup Classic would be the fastest speed figure of the year, or right there. But in this case, Gunrunner actually ran a little better on my numbers in the Woodward Stakes at Saratoga. And he did that by just blitzing a grade 1 field. We're going to see the stretch run here of that race. And I mean, Gunrunner actually showed a little bit of versatility, sitting just off of that fast pace. I believe there was a horse entered as a rabbit, and he just kind of sat off of him and put him away when he wanted to, and drew away and crushed this field. He wound up with a big 142 Timeform US speed figure, which is actually the biggest one I've given since Timeform US has been in existence. You don't often see horses win grade 1 races by 10+ lengths. I remember Frosted did it in the Met Mile last year, but you can go many, many years without seeing a horse win by that. So I have no problem saying that Gunrunner was the best horse this year. He ran the 2 best speed figures, and if I listed at the top 10, he would show up on there a few more times. So Gunrunner, definitely horse of the year in my opinion. He will get my vote for sure, and 142 and 140 puts him up there with as good a horses as I've ever rated. That's it for this year on Timeform US for Out of the Gate, and now we'll head back to Dan in the studio.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. Time for our #1 best performance of 2017. Well, it's mine on my top 4 list. It's 2 on Matt's list. And again, you can catch Matt's top 10 review of 2017, The Matt Bernier Show, next Friday, live.drf.com at noon Eastern Time. It's the horse of the year. It's Gun Runner. It's the Breeders' Cup Classic. Much like Collected Specific Classic, he ran hard from start to finish in fast time at 1.25 miles against the best older horses in the country and some good 3-year-olds as well. And he just turned them all away. Let's watch the stretch run of the Breeders' Cup Classic. Matt, what I liked best was even a little bit earlier on the turn at the 5/16 pole. Collected, who's sitting in second right now, took a good strong run at Gun Runner. And for a second, I'm a big Collected fan. You liked him as well. We thought we were going to win this thing, and Gun Runner just said absolutely no, and he is extending at the wire.
They turned him away very, very easily, and I think that's the thing that part of what made this effort as impressive as it was. You were playing in Collected's backyard. This was his track. He had proven it in the Pacific Classic, and now all of a sudden this horse comes in from the East Coast. He does what he needs to do. He had been out in Southern California for a few weeks, but the fact that he did it as impressively as he did, and again, depending on what you believe, seems like the inside was not where you wanted to be on Saturday or Friday, the Breeders' Cup. He was toward the inside. He wasn't actually on the rail, but he kind of bunked all that kind of stuff. He went on with it. It was a very, very impressive effort, and it was a fitting sort of cherry on top of the sundae for an unbelievable 2017.
Imperturbable as Gun Runner. He can sit from off of the pace. He can go right to the front as he did. And Florence, I love the ride.
Yeah.
Don't fool around.
Yeah.
Go to the front. You're inside a Collected. Make that horse chase you. Make that horse earn his stripes. He, of course, beat Arrogate in what was our #4 performance, the Pacific Classic. Now he had to do it against an informed, sharp Gun Runner. And you're right. How many horses that we saw shipped to Del Mar just didn't seem to handle the track? Arrogate, of course, being the most notable horse, if you believe that is his excuse. Gun Runner handled the ship no problem. He handled the track no problem. He handled Collected no problem. And it had to be sweet for Steve Asmussen to get the revenge on Arrogate after being run down in the Dubai World Cup. When it seemed, Matt, turning into the stretch, everything was going Gun Runner's way. You're right. It might not be appreciated historically because we're used to American Pharaoh and California Chrome and Arrogate. We've been very lucky to have these top flight horses. This has been a powerful run, and if he wins the Pegasus World Cup, he's going to be a heavy favorite to do so. Boy, that's a tremendous run.
Yeah, it just almost feels like he's falling in one of those very odd times where he's one of many really good ones that we've seen. And you can even include the girls, the amount of fillies and mares that we've seen over the past handful of years. You know, I'm just curious, 15 years from now, when we look back, I think everyone's going to remember Arrogate's name, and they're going to remember these performances. Everyone's going to remember Gun Runner, but is he going to be the first one that comes to mind? I'm not entirely sure, and that's nothing against the horse. I just don't know that he, you know, with American Pharaoh and with California Chrome, with his fanfare, I wonder if he's going to be one of the all-timers recently that just doesn't get the top billing.
Don't forget Shared Belief, also a big name. I think that when most folks hear the name Gun Runner 15, 20 years down the road, unfairly they're going to say, wasn't that the year? What happened to Arrogate?
Yeah, 100%.
That's going to be the headline of 2017. Not that Gun Runner was awesome and unstoppable pretty much ever since he came back from Dubai, and that's a shame because Gun Runner is just a good, solid, top racehorse. At least he's going to get Horse of the Year coming up at Gulfstream Park 1 week before he goes off the heavy favorite in the Pegasus World Cup. We hope you enjoyed this special edition of Out of the Gate. Please tweet at us your top 5 at DRF Inside Post, at DRF Video. Remember that we still have stakes previews for Saturday and Tuesday, opening day, Santa Anita. They will be available all weekend long. Video.drf.com and the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. You're going to want to catch Matt next Friday. Of course, he's going to be this Friday, the Matt Bernier Show. Next Friday, Matt Bernier, of course, is going to have his top 10 list. Again, we thank you so much for supporting Out of the Gate in 2017. We thank our great team, and we hope this week and heading into opening day, Santa Anita on Tuesday, you have the best of luck when your horses break out of the gate.